for us to be living. And then we're going to be talking today, in addition, about how do we live out the paramita of dana paramita, or the perfection of generosity would be one of the ways to put it. Another way might be generosity beyond our typical idea of generosity. And we'll talk a little more about the whole definition of a paramita is transcendent, beyond our typical idea, reaching the other shore. Let me think of some other ways to put this. Beyond the idea of self and other. I think that's the one I'm going to stick with. That's the one that actually means something to me. Beyond the idea of self and other. So there's two poems. Anybody, let's get back to the first one. Just so that everybody knows, I am recording now in case you want to speak or not speak based on that reality. We are recording. I want to be cautious and careful about regarding everyone's privacy and anonymity. If
I'll read it.
Yep. Yes, Dennis. Thanks, Dennis. Yes, thank you. I'll get you. I just want to make sure that people know, if you don't want to be on the screen and don't want to speak out loud, that's not a problem. Well, what I would suggest then is that you privately chat me. I might speak to something you're saying there, but I will not call you by name or say that it is you, blank person, by name who said it. So just know there's still a way to participate without feeling like you have to be on screen or overexposed. So Dennis, thank you for that. I'm gonna just let you take a look at that for a moment. When you feel ready, you just go ahead, and then we'll find someone to read the second one.
Okay. Excuse me, everyone. And good morning, everyone. Until they lost their jobs, people made fun of his big-hearted ways. His generosity was loudly laughed at. He was the brunt of an ample amount of mean jokes. They called him free-handed and snickered until they lost their jobs, and their children were hungry and they were desperate. Guess who they turned to?
Guess who they turned to then? That's right. Thank you very much, Dennis. That's just a poem written by, could have been you or I, someone in a, and then here's this other one, another similar, not written by a professional, just written by a person. So look at it. If somebody would like to read it, just come on line, say good morning, and we'll have you let you take a smack at it.
Diana, can you move that more to the middle of the screen to scroll down a little?
It is not, it won't move past there. So what I can do possibly, however, is get rid of this one. Let's see if that moves it up. Does that help?
I see it until reminiscing about.
Okay. Let me move it over here. Does that help?
You might want to minimize the window because you can't, it's maybe whole page.
I sounded like a valuable and technical instruction that I just didn't get. I'm going to put paying it forward up. Does that help?
No, you still only are showing half your page, so nobody can read the rest of the poem.
Okay. I have no idea. Yeah, I have no idea why that is now, only because now I am, I've got it up here as high as I can get it. and I can't minimize anything more for now. So let me read this. Sorry, I would have loved to have shared it with someone. Paying it forward. Sitting at a table by himself, glancing at the menu, feeling lonely, reminiscing about his wife and how she passed, he lingered a while. On his way out, he left enough to cover the meal for the scruffy young couple with the 2 kids celebrating Mother's Day. On his way out, he left enough to cover the meal for the scruffy young couple with the 2 kids celebrating Mother's Day. I'm going to stop that share now. So what I'd like you to do for just a moment is think about what that poem is speaking to, both of them, different aspects of generosity or dana, paramita. And we're going to reflect on that in our practice this morning. Here's another thought or two as we are preparing for this contemplation. That's what I consider true generosity. You give your all, and yet you always feel as if it has cost you nothing. That was by Simone de Beauvoir. You cannot do a kindness too soon because you never know how soon it will be too late. It takes generosity to discover the whole through others, not the whole, but the W-H-O-L-E. It takes generosity to discover the whole through others. If you realize you are only a violin, you can open yourself up to the world by playing your role in the concert. That's Jacques Cousteau. With gentleness, overcome anger. With generosity, overcome meanness. With truth, overcome delusion. And this was written in the Dhammapada. Give what you have to someone. It may be better than you dare to think. Give what you have to someone. It may be better than you dare to think. That's by Longfellow. Gentleness, self-sacrifice, and generosity are the exclusive possession of no one race or religion. That's Gandhi. And here's Khalil Gibran. You often say, I would give, but only to the deserving. The trees in the orchards say not so, nor the flocks in your pasture. They give that they may live, for to withhold is to perish. They give that they may live, for to withhold is to perish. Generosity is the most natural outward expression of an inner attitude. An inner attitude, that's what the paramita is, of compassion and loving kindness. Generosity is the action of these. Okay. I think that's enough to give us some felt sense. Seeing where that experience, and we're going to talk about how to practice that, is alive, embodied, present, and known by you. So we're going to rest now in this field of generosity, the generous, open heart that gives everything as if it were nothing at all. And we begin this by setting our aspirations and intentions for a practice. This is the beginning of Dana Paramita. right here in the intention. We intention that we be well, that we be safe, that we have ease, that we be happy. And we intention beyond. Remember, this is a transcendental reality. We practice beyond one's small sense of self to include, it's not an either or, this practice and instruction of Dana Paramita for those we love, for those in need, for those in suffering, those in fear, those in hunger and loneliness, those who are not well. And we can get the felt sense. There's almost an impulse, isn't there? The yes for this as we recognize the need. And that's what Jacques Cousteau was saying. We do not recognize our wholeness completely until we are able to recognize our interconnectedness. The fact that if others are not well, we cannot be well. If others are not safe, we cannot be safe. Transcendental simply meaning beyond one's own ego grasp. May we offer this practice today to all beings everywhere without exception, omitting none, freeing us all, inviting us to our humanness, freeing us for this. And we're going to begin with shamatha, or calm abiding practice, as we always do. There's a couple ways to do it. We're first going to simply incline our attention, this kind and generous attention, showering it down on ourselves. Just feeling the sense of the body as it sits here. And you sit here this morning by virtue of the infinite Dana Paramita of many other beings. From the generosity of others, you have this life, this moment. My teacher, Joko Beck, simply believed generosity was doing what needed to be done. She wasn't fancy. She didn't like the ideas of some kind of ego fixation on the paramitas. It was simply doing what you could see to do. And we're going to talk about how we get in the way of that very thing every day. Feeling the gift of this body. Its wellness. It's being fed. It's being clothed. It's being housed. The body's gift to itself of self-regulation. The fact that you can sit up, that your head doesn't fall to the side, that you can choose to open and close the eyes. That we can smile, a smile of gratitude for the generosity of this life in being alive. We're just resting in the body, feeling the sense of the body breathing. And then, as has already likely happened, you begin to notice the breath with some vividness somewhere in the area of the breathscape, and just relaxing and settling the mind in the cradling in the rock of that breath. Also a gift, generously offered. Dana Paramita, doing what there is to be done, not from the place of a self, a solid, fixed identity, not from a place of an other, helpless, desperate, despairing, but simply an act of being alive. And to be truly generous, we must first empty ourselves of the self. We get rid of the idea of the I, the me, or the thing that is mine to be given. We also get rid of the idea of the other, something foreign or separate, something apart in any way at all. We recognize the wholeness of the exchange completely. And as is written in the slogans that we'll be studying, no gift, no giver, no receiver. It dissolves all the barriers, all the concepts, the helper and the one who needs help, dissolved. Emptying ourselves of ourself. And with each out breath, then we dissolve the barrier. We melt the meanness, the stinginess, the fear, really, that I will not have enough, I will not be enough. We begin to dissolve those identities and ideas so that we can offer what needs to be given, whatever that is. We dissolve ideas of too much or too little. Simply egoic measurements. And then I'd like you to call to mind the last time you can recollect this experience, this heartfelt sense of wanting, gifting, wanting somebody to have something. It might have been comfort. It might have been a smile. It might have been wishing for someone's ease. These are all genuine acts of generosity from the heart that don't necessarily have an exchange of an item. This is actually a fairly small definition of generosity. See if you can contact the heart of generosity, your genuine wish to share. Your genuine wish for wholeness, for sufficiency, maybe for equality. And breathe into that heart and see if you can make contact with what that is and how it feels. Not the act itself, we're going to examine that later, but really the heart that made the offer. The heart that opened beyond the small idea of oneself. And then I'd like you to think about what it was that invited that sense of openness, inclusion, expanding. What was it that you made contact with that invited this impulse to share, to offer, to be? What triggered the impulse? Was it that you saw someone and made a connection? You just like me? Was it that you saw a need? You made contact with a particular need or a sense of suffering? Did you have a sense of the goodness or the rightness of something and wanted to support it? Did you have a sense of something being able to be a benefit in a way that maybe was not most evident or being most useful in its existing form? What was the trigger? And then that other question, how did you know it? How did you recognize this impulse in this wish? I want this to be given. I want it to be shared. How did you know it? What was it about the exchange that made it joyful and effortless? What was it about the exchange that made it joyful and effortless, with no concern for the self? In fact, in generosity, the reality is the eyes and the heart have completely included the other so that there is no sense of other. Just, I want you to have it. It will be a benefit to you or them, and without any sense of separation. Can you sense in this moment how there was no fixed sense of self? You weren't thinking, can I do without this? What if I don't have it? What might happen if I make this offer or enact this gesture? Can you sense the emptiness of self? There was no deep thoughts. What will this mean for me? Not in terms of what I won't have or in terms of what I'll get back. There's no sense of that in the act of generosity. Know me and know you. Just the open heart in its natural exchange. You might say in its natural response to the truth of our humanness. Acts of kindness and compassion are all generous. And then I'd like you to let go of that image and recollect now a moment where you thought of offering something and then you didn't. Recollect a moment where you hesitated, where you considered but didn't follow through, where the thought flashed and the hand or self grasped. See if you can find one of those moments. And as you're recollecting this moment, breathe into the heart space. See how it's feeling now. A pinch, a tightness, a grip, a burn, an emptiness, a numbness, a pain. Breathe in. See if you can stay in contact for a moment. And see if you can make contact with what was the fear that kept you from embodying generosity. You had the impulse. And then something came along within and shadowed it, collapsed it, contracted it. And it's always some fear. And I want you to feel into that fear. Feel its pain, its grip. Might have been the gift of time, a gift of a resource, a gift of you. And what would you have needed to remember in that moment so that that fear would not have won? What could you have offered yourself in that moment that the fear would not have been lived out? Dana Paramita. Generosity beyond thoughts, generosity beyond ideas of self and other. What would you have needed to remember? What truth was forgotten? Maybe a pause would have helped. Maybe remembering there is enough. And all of the fears that get in the way are self-clinging by nature. The I am not enough fears. I don't have enough fears. I'll look stupid or free-handed, as in that poem. I'll be rejected. Self-making stories. And all self-making stories are fear stories. Make contact with this. What gets in the way? And then I'd like you to picture yourself having made the offer, having gifted the item, having stepped in when you stepped back, having been completely open-hearted right now, right in that moment. Follow through now. It's not just as simple as send a check. We tend in our culture to assign generosity to monetary offerings. But be careful, because I think it's often bigger and more available. It's simply stepping in when we would, by habit, step back. It's offering oneself when we otherwise contract. We become fearless in the practice of the paramitas. No shutting down. No one gifting, no one collapsing. And feel the effects of that offering, the stepping in, the stepping up, maybe the speaking out. And how that feels. The path of the Bodhisattva. The instructions are in the Paramitas, beginning with Dana Paramita, the perfection of offering oneself. And for the last few moments, just resting in the heart of Dana Paramita, showering yourself with kindness, with compassion, with regard, with forgiveness, whatever's needed. Remember, Dana Paramita is directionless. There's no giver, no gift, no receiver. It moves in all directions and is responding. So offer yourself what is needed now. And maybe simply the invitation for this week's practice to act in accord with this generous heart, to offer what one can of oneself. And then we smile at the nourishment that is extended in all directions. remembering that there is enough. Just stretching it out for a moment. So let's talk about this for a minute, and then we're going to look at the chapter. We're going to do a little perusal again of some of Chogyam's thoughts about this. And so let's start with the so can you say anything, and maybe again in the chat we can see each other this way, more of us can participate. Can you write something about the way it felt for you in the body when you recollected that moment of generosity? How did it feel for you in the body as you were recollecting that moment of generosity? Let's write it in chat and see what the universal experience is really of this way of being. The Paramitas are a way of being, spacious, light, preciousness in the here and now, openness, bright light, warmth, a certain kind of radiance, yes. The heart blasted wide open, expansive. This sense of doing the right thing feels right, doesn't it? Lightness, a happiness. Yeah, beautiful. Right, warmth, very common. Lovely, thank you. And how did you feel as you were, well, let me read this. I want to make sure I don't move past somebody. Yeah, kept questioning the self around the gesture. Is it right? Yes, actually, we're going to be talking about that very thing because that's what actually gets in the way. This is the self-making mind that from this amazing moment of really just responding to life, what often climbs in the way is what I began to speak to and address here, is the thinking mind. What if it's not enough? What if it's too much? What if I don't have enough tomorrow? What if, what if, what if? And in fact, it climbs directly in the way of this most amazing, look at the beautiful words assigned to the impulse, to the impulsion of the open heart to offer what is needed. We'll just use those words, right? It is in fact exactly the ego that Chogyam was saying in the last 5 chapters that we have to be watchful of, because it's going to climb in and distract us from this most amazing, beautiful offering. We're going to be practicing with that a little bit this week. the gesture being offered and may not be appreciated. Yes, this is the banker in us, the accountant in us, isn't it? Going, what about, what's the amount, where maybe more or less, what if I don't get back the thing and I gave too much? And that's that same egoic self-making element. It's exactly right. Thank you for naming it, everyone. Yeah. We worry about the other people. We make it, we project is actually the right understanding. We project, what if it's rejected? What if they didn't need it? What if they take it personally? What if they feel diminished by the offering? It's actually not true, folks. It's projected to be true. What about the other? But actually the fear, the greatest fear is where? We project that onto others. What if they didn't like it? What if they didn't need it? What if they didn't want it? What if it's not enough? What if it's too much? What if it makes them uncomfortable? But where is the real fear and pain? Somebody wrote, I think I might be the chairman of the bank. Yes, that's exactly how we feel, don't we? What if, yeah, the fear is in us. Yes. What is the fear? What is that fear? It's our fear. What is it? As you were checking in on the own, what kept you from making this most loving, most generous, natural state an offer? It is a fear, not being accepted, not getting what I think I need back, not getting the love I need. Yeah, getting taken advantage of. Yeah. The fear of being seen and then rejected. We have both a fear of invisibility as well as a fear of visibility, don't we? We carry them all. This is that self-maker. I'm afraid of being seen and I'm afraid of not being seen. What a dilemma. That's the self-made dilemma. I'm afraid of being seen because maybe if I'm seen, what? It won't be enough. It won't be worthy. It won't be appreciated. People won't be grateful enough or appreciative enough. And in fact, we do have the other fear that we'll be accused or seen is the greatest fear. The egoic fear is that I will not be enough. And so better to hide in some kind of anonymity, invisibility, or just putting out what I want others to see. And this is all ego making and takes a lot of time and energy from us, by the way. Being vulnerable, the fear of being vulnerable. Did you notice when you recollected that moment of giving that you felt vulnerable? When you recollected a moment of freely offering, of just responding, of just being in life and offering what was available. Did you notice any worry about that? When you recollected that moment, you did not. Because it's beyond ego. This is what Chogyam says. He says it's empty of self and other. It's empty. This is why we spent so long reviewing these concepts of empty. It's empty of me or you, enough or not enough, right or wrong, appreciated sufficiently, not appreciated. It loses all concepts because it is completely present and responding. And in that moment of that, however you recollected that moment, you began there. Now, what someone said, I think it was Leanne who put it on everyone, so I feel comfortable naming you Leanne, is that then what happens sometimes? The mind steps in, doesn't it? Even in this moment of generosity, did anybody recollect their moment and then actually have that egoic sense go, wait a minute, maybe I shouldn't have, maybe I should have kept that scarf. Maybe I shouldn't have given those extra walking poles. Wait a minute, that might have been a mistake. Who knows? What happens if I lose the ones I have? That's all ego. stepping in. And by the way, it's a contraction that, what did the quote say? Harms us more than any other, doesn't it? It harms us. It squeezes the love right out of us. That is the nature of fear. The Dhammapada said meanness. I don't think it's true. I don't think meanness stands alone. I think it comes out of fearfulness. We get contracted, we get grabby, we get the gimmies, right out of what? Not meanness, fear. And if we can't recognize our own and can't hold some kind of essential, radical compassion for ourselves in this, we cannot heal it. And if we cannot heal it, we cannot let it go. We will keep the grabbies and go, well, maybe not, what if they judge me? What if, is there any judgment you can imagine? We read the poem that said what? And then the other was judged as adult. He was judged as too easy. He was judged as too free-handed, right? And others snickered. Do you think there was any damage to him in all of that? Didn't matter. It doesn't matter. We have to be watchful of that ego sense of I need to then get mirrored in this good, right, enough way. We're going to be practicing this week Dana Paramita, and we'll talk about how we're going to after we look at the chapter a little bit. But do you, I guess I want to stop here. Do you understand this idea of what gets in the way of the natural responding, generous, inclusive heart? Do you get the sense of it? You're naming it, I think, pretty well, but I want to make sure we're going to need to be recognizing it this week. Yeah, the thinking mind, the one that goes, what if, what about me? Could you hear it in all of that? What if, what about who? Me. It becomes self-directed, stops being the beautiful river flow of energy, just moving out, offering what it can and has, and actually contracts into this self-making, a limited, deficient feeling self. Yes, to heal it, you have to be willing to reveal it. That's right, Dennis. We have to be willing to look. What about the modern psychology that seems to be very much about preserving the I? Yes, there is an essential directedness towards being enough oneself so that one can freely offer what one has without senses of what deprivation or deficiency. But so it is true, we offer first to ourselves so that we are not so in fear. We're not so in a sense of unworthiness. We recognize who we really are. So that's the I we're talking about, not the self-directed I, but the one who knows that I am already enough. That I. And the egoic I is, guess which one? The opposite. There is constant fear, isn't there, in the egoic I, that I don't have enough. In fact, you can't satisfy the egoic I at all, can you? There's not enough to have. There's not a big enough house. There's not a right enough neighborhood. The fear, in fact, sometimes grows. More often grows in an egoic I, which is I can't be satisfied. I've got to get more preservation, more stuff, more accolades, more acknowledgement, more love, more. It's like an empty well that cannot be filled. And in fact, is perpetually dissatisfied, perpetually feels deficient, just like you're all naming. It's the nature of the egoic I. But the true I, the I am, the empty I that Chogyam talks about, doesn't even reference that. It's just seeing what there is, being in the moment completely, without me, you, us, them, enough, not enough. Those concepts completely fall away, and you know about it because you've done it. You know about it because you've done it. And you know exactly how it felt. There wasn't a thought about it, was there? No, not until the egoic I activated. And sometimes even in these most generous acts, these most loving acts, these most kind and compassionate acts, all which represent generosity, by the way. What we did later was, wait a minute. What about me? And that's just something to recognize, that that's fear arising after the fact. And we have to be kind and regarding even then by recognizing what happened, which is, whoops, there I was in the moment. And then I was like, wait a minute, I kind of like that vase. Right? That's just the nature of the egoic self, which steps in only for one reason: to preserve what already feels deficient. Being stuck in the past where I didn't receive any generosity, how do I send out something I don't know? By practice. And so we practice in small moments. Remember, this is our work, repeated often. So we begin to feel the impulse and act. And that's actually going to be our practice this week. We're going to feel the impulse to move, to open, to move towards, to act, to speak from kindness or compassion. That's, remember, the essence of where generosity comes from. And we're going to follow through. And we're going to follow through no matter what those small voices say. It will be best to recognize them, let them rest to the side, and we're going to go ahead. This is a practice that Sharon Salzberg suggested years ago to someone who was saying, but I feel scared, I feel deficient. And the response was, act anyway. Act anyway. Don't let that be the thing that collapses you. Take the small moment and act. Whether it is a thought, may you be safe and well. That's generous, isn't it? That's a generous heart. May you have ease. May you be free from suffering. May you have enough to eat. These very thoughts are acts of generosity. And then we could speak them, couldn't we? The second step. I want you to be well. I want your happiness. I want you to feel relief. I want you to have what you need. We could speak them. That would be a second level of generosity. And then we can actually act directly. You could make an offer of yourself, is the way I'm going to leave this. I want us to be careful. We tend to see generosity limited by things, don't we? It's actually considered to be the lowest level of generosity, is giving a thing. What's the highest level of generosity then? 3 levels. Giving a thing is 1, considered the lowest level. What's the highest? Let's look at the chat and see what people say. What is the highest level of generosity? Giving of yourself. Exactly. In whatever form that then comes. Giving wholly of yourself in whatever form, thought, word, or deed, that then comes. And in fact, we know for something to then be enacted, you had to have thought it, right? And then allowed it to expand and move forward. Giving of yourself. Thought, word, and deed, giving of yourself. We're going to be practicing it this week. Let's go to see what, if there's not more, let me check in and make sure that we're understanding this idea. How do you have clear boundaries and still be generous? I'm going to say right now, most of us are not generous enough to be worried about boundaries. The reality of Dana Paramita, by the way, is that prajna, or wisdom, is always also in hand. Prajna, or wisdom, is also there. We call that clear seeing, or mindfulness, is also present. Otherwise, it simply becomes a self-deprecating action, not skillful, right? If you're going to be harmed by the action, it cannot be Dana Paramita. If you're going to be harmed by an action, so I'm not going to go into inner city somewhere and start handing out food cards in the middle of the night. This would not be skillful. Prajna and mindfulness have to be included in these ways. When the heart opens completely, we already know that that's been done. You're talking about somebody taking advantage of you, I think, and most typically we also feel that. And it's not fear, it's a questioning, like, wait a minute. Right? And so I'll use two examples and then we'll go on. The two examples I have are my half-brother, who has called me a couple times asking for money. It was not generosity, I can tell you completely, that had me say no and set that boundary. It was actually my genuine, most generous care for him. Most generous care for him. My deepest love for him allowed me to say no. And can you understand what that is? Out of my genuine, deepest care for him, the most generous I could be, wholehearted, most loving, was to say no. And how is that so? See, because we get lost in the action, don't we? There again, we go, wait a minute, generosity means giving away, giving up. No, it is one's most wise, most present, most loving heart, all combined. It is the whole heart combined. So that's one example. The second example, and then I want to look at the chapter, is that time I basically threw $5 at a homeless guy and his dog. I've talked about this story. I'm not going to review it. But in my anxiety, my nervousness, I sort of flung $5 his way and he threw it back at me, basically. And that was exactly also right. It was exactly right. It was a deep teaching, a critically important moment. I gave it both out of fear and a sense of duty, both wrong, both from a contracted heart, because I gave it like this, and he caught me, and he threw it back at me and said, no, thank you. Beautiful, beautiful. Contracted heart revealed. I needed to see it. Whether it was $5, $5 million, or 500 million thousand, it doesn't matter, does it? What mattered was I wasn't really responding. I was in a reaction, and in the reaction I got caught, and it was a beautiful thing to have happen so that I could see it myself. It was very important. Yes, we're getting a little stuck in the boundary idea. I want us to be a little careful, because I think that we want to watch that. I've got to keep enough. I've got to, yes, of course you're going to be protected. Of course you're going to offer it in a way that you're going to be safe. That's that prajna and mindfulness. It rarely has to do with what somebody has asked of you also. It has to do with naturally the impulsion for sharing, for participating, for stepping in. Remember, I said stepping in, not stepping back, that actually our generosity is most expressed. Not because somebody asks us for anything, where I think we can be exploited, but it comes from within. This is our own action, not the action by request of the other. I want us to make contact with our own natural generosity. And there is no need for the boundary there. Give it, offer it, step in. Be watchful of this idea that I've got to protect myself. This is not about a relationship with another. This is simply about your relationship with yourself. And that you're honoring your own good heart. Remember, there is no other in this story. There is only that loving presence in you. Okay, I think you get the idea. Let's go to the chapter. I'm going to click here for share so we can look at this together. So remember, we backed up a little bit into, I think it was chapter 24. And I wanted to start right with this first line here, which is you need an understanding of egolessness. Chogyam, remember, also calls this emptiness. This is the path of the Bodhisattva. You cannot be on the path of the Bodhisattva, locked into these separate self-concepts of you and me, self and other, me offering to. And that's why we came up with that slogan, no gift, no giver, no receiver. That's the idea of the emptiness. That means no solid you, no solid me. The exchange is just what is arising naturally from these moments and appearances. There is no I am giving, I am good, you are deficient, you are needy, you are bad. The Paramitas, I'm going to move this because I can't get to the Paramitas are often understood as the supreme perfections. So get these ideas, these supreme qualities of a bodhisattva. And they are also practices and instructions, the Paramitas. So get these three ideas. They're way of being, qualities. They're also practices. They're also instructions. All of this is true in the Paramitas. And they are supreme. They are noble. They are more than the consideration of oneself. The Paramitas here says going beyond, and it really means going beyond the limited sense of oneself. Arriving at the other shore actually doesn't mean a place, by the way, at all. It means arriving into the infinite, arriving to the oneness, I think Dennis said, right? Arriving in this place where these ridiculous distinctions, how much or not, self or other, simply evaporate and dissolve. That's what the other shore means. There is no samsara or suffering or nirvana or enlightenment that distinguishes us. You the sufferer, me the one who's got it together. Those kinds of thoughts and ideas aren't even within the realm of the Bodhisattva. You are going beyond your habitual habits. Well, guess what our number one habitual habit is? Clinging, craving, grasping, and holding. Clinging, craving, grasping, and holding. Mine. And it is only one thing. Remember, it is not our nature to do so. It is only out of egoic fear that I am not enough, that I do not have enough, that even is perpetuated. And we're going to see if we can abandon it all. He says also down here that we want to employ skillful means. That's that prajna and mindfulness. You don't leave it behind to just give everything away. That is not understood to be a dana paramita at all. It doesn't mean give away the house. Let me see. I don't want to go over this. There's the wisdom factor. It's always going to be present as well. He talks about the way we can expand the paramitas, including Dana Paramita also being a wisdom factor. All right, I think that's about it. Let me see if there's anything else critical here. Paramitas do not refer to ordinary ethics, such as bank loans. This is what we were talking about when we were talking about measuring. It's not based on a typical measuring stick, is it? How much, this much, not this much, too much, not enough. We actually abandon those ideas for what is needed now and what do I have to offer towards that. It is that simple. The complications begin as the thinking mind steps in, and that thinking mind is egoic in nature. It has only one thought in mind: save, protect me, and I'm always at risk, says the ego. I'm always deficient, says the ego. I am never enough or have enough, says the ego. It's by its nature. It's only fear-based. So it says, let's not use ordinary methods for this assessment. Paramita practice is based on human decency, just being human and alive. It offers itself naturally. We have to get in the way. We get in the way. How to be in the world and help all those who are suffering, including ourselves. And it says, Dana Paramita is the beginning of the way that we also offer to ourselves. And what we're offering to ourselves is what? Remembering that we are already enough. Can you imagine this? That Dana Paramita begins with ourselves by remembering that we are already enough. What would you give then? Right? What would you give then when you remembered that you have already been gifted everything? You have already been given enough. What would you offer? And how would you step into that offering is the work this week. There is always a place for you. There is always a stirrup for you to put your foot in, and there is always an empty chair for you to jump into as you ride up the ski slope. Chogyam's saying this is the way to remember that what we also need is always available to us. That's what he meant by those little cute phrases. What we need is also always available. The ski slope always has an empty chair for us. It's pretty cute. He was just trying to use practical examples. I don't want to spend too much time. This is all pretty understandable. We give up thoughts. The gossip, I love the way he puts this, the gossip that we tell ourselves. What am I supposed to be doing? What if it's not enough? What if it's too much? What if I get taken advantage of? What if the person doesn't appreciate me? He calls it gossip. I love this. This is the gossip of the ego. What if, what if, what if, what not, what if not, what? We're going to put it aside and we're going to allow the impulse to guide us and see how it goes. We're going to take a really grand experiment here this week and see what happens when we simply follow the impulse to show up, to step in, to speak up, to offer what we can. Not what we think we're supposed to, but what we can. And we can start small. Dana Paramita, this is an important statement, begins in the awakened heart mind. It isn't first the act of giving. It is first here, recognizing there's a way I can be of benefit. And what if we began there? With this idea, I can be of benefit right here, right now, this present moment. And that's the beginning practice. What can I offer to be of benefit right now? Right now. And that's the question we're going to hold this week. What can I do to be of benefit right now? And then we've already done this in the practice today, but this idea of applying emptiness, we're not going to review his ideas of profundity. It simply means showing up. The profundity of showing up. Can you imagine this? Right? How profound would it be if you just showed up completely and said, I'm here. What's needed? Can you imagine that action? I'm here. What's needed? We're going to practice that also this week. I'm here. What do you need? And what I really am always surprised by myself, by the way, is how little people ask. Not how much, how little they ask. I'm here. What is needed? I want everybody to remember that phrase. I want you to say it at least 10 times this week. I'm here. What do you need? Write it down, folks. What do you need? And that's going to be your discipline this week. We see the paramitas as requiring practice and discipline. And the discipline is, you just committed, didn't you, to saying that phrase 10 times this week. That's a discipline, isn't it? It's a practice. You're going to have to find places to put that. 10. I'm here. What do you need? And I want you to see what happens. The concept of discipline or Shila here is simply that it's also a practice. It's not just an idea that we log away. It's not just a warm, fuzzy feeling. It actually is enacted and becomes a behavior. And we're going to put it into practice. That's what the discipline, when it says there's always a discipline with a paramita, it means there's a way to practice it as well. Not just think about it and not just feel good about it, but that there is a skillful means. And we're going to put it into place. It also says that meditation, reflection, contemplation, and study are important. We don't just mean, by the way, meditation on the cushion. We mean paying attention on the spot in our everyday lives. This is called post-meditation practice. And it means we don't just leave it back there in our Tuesday morning practice with a warm, fuzzy feeling. We keep paying attention and looking. Where does that feeling happen for me? Where does the feeling of contraction, not enoughness, fear, and the egoic I step in, right? That meditation and contemplation is also going to be necessary. We have to see where the generous heart naturally arises and where it doesn't. And samadhi and meditation are necessary for both, by the way. Let's see where I put some marks. The only other thing I think I want to say, and then I know it's time and we are going to prepare to end, is that generosity or dana paramita is understood to be the essential beginning of the spiritual path. That it is the beginning. And without this willingness to step in, somebody's on unmute and it's creating a little static. Thank you for checking. Without this willingness to exchange, we might say without the willingness to be completely present and then responding to whatever is here, this exchange, right? Until we're ready to do that, that there really is no spiritual path. If we're measuring, if we're withholding, if we're tentative, that in some way it is some expression of that egoic fear, and then responding with generosity, with kindness and compassion to that is also a part of the spiritual path, right? That no matter what, we are responding with generosity, even to our own stinginess, not to feed it, but to hold compassion, radical compassion for the suffering, the pain, the distress, the dissatisfaction, and the craving that is its result, isn't it? That we can be generous and then even offer compassion to ourselves in this fear. So I am here, what is needed are our two most important phrases this week. I am here, I am showing up, I am present, what is needed? And you're going to ask that question both silently and then 10 times this week. You're going to ask it out loud. What do you need? What can I do? How can I help? Right? I am here is the essential beginning of Dana Paramita. Without that, there's nowhere to go. Is there? There's nowhere to go. Where do you go if you don't show up? And we already know the answer. Nowhere. Nowhere. Look at chapter 26 this week. We'll talk about it some more next week. Generosity is really a key understanding, but be watchful of all the old ideas, lots of old ideas about how if we give truly, wholeheartedly, that we will be bankrupt. And it's the opposite, I can tell you, completely the opposite. And so let's practice for just one more moment together. I'm going to check into the, make sure we're all okay. Yes, we are blocking ourselves at every turn, Jan said. Are we blocked? Yes. Fear, doesn't it? Does only one thing. It makes us small. It contracts us. It shrinks who we really are. And really practicing with that open-heartedness is the whole of the perfection beyond perfection. Generosity beyond our concepts, our ideas of it is Dana Paramita. Let's sit together for just a moment, feeling into that wide open, spacious, generous, all exchanging, continuous Dana Paramita. I am here. What is needed? What can I offer? These are the essential questions. Say them a couple times for yourself. I'm here. What is needed? And then remember, no matter how much money in your bank account, no matter how much energy you have, there is a vital, nourishing exchange right there. It isn't in the amount, it's in the authenticity, the completeness, the wholeheartedness with which it is offered. Watch the egoic mind's measuring stick. It will short shrift you. No other. If you have an impulse this week to offer, I want you to do it. I want you to see how that feels. Instead of contracting, letting the river flow, beginning with yourself. And in the full well of our being, what happens? It just pours forth. There is no other way. Breathing, resting in that completeness, in that wholeness, in that openness, in that warmth, in the expanding open heart of Dana Paramita. May we dedicate these blessings and all the good. May we dedicate this to ourselves and all beings so that we can all remember we are already enough. May we be happy. May we have ease. May we be free from harm and danger. And most importantly, may we remember who we really are and act in accord. May this practice today contribute. So be it. Thank you so much for your practice today and being here. I saw a lot of head nods. I'm really appreciating your deep connection to the Paramita practice. It's going to get very practical, isn't it? We're going to climb right out of those ideas that what about emptiness into practicing emptiness. And Dana Paramita is the beginning. It is the way we most practice the emptiness. No self, no other, offering spontaneously, naturally what we have. You don't have to offer what you don't have. That doesn't even make sense because then there's no offer at all. There's just contraction, offering what we have. I look forward to reviewing this with you next week. I will write this little note so that you remember what the practice is on and off the cushion. Remembering the generous heart, remembering the good that it feels, remembering the stingy heart, remembering the egoic element, how it tightens us up and makes us sick, really. And then seeing if we can make contact with that impulse that is in all of us to show up and then do what we can. That's simple. Let's see how we do. Love to you all. Blessings to everyone. Beautiful day to you. Greg will be here on Thursday morning. There is no more Wednesday at 11, but I'll look forward to seeing you again on Saturday. Be well, everyone. See you then.